Hi guys, and welcome to the show. It's the SA Rugby Magazine Lions series brought to you by Betway. I'm Zelim now, this is Mark Keohane, and on my right is Scott Gibbs, the legend of the 1997 tour to South Africa. Gents, we made it to the business end of the series. First test is days away. Scott, just some of your thoughts on that Lions team that's been announced.
Let's start. No one would have predicted that 23. That's for sure. I mean, whether you ascribe gear in South Africa or back in the UK. I mean, there were a few notable omissions and a few surprise selections, but nevertheless, it's still a very strong start in 23. So a little bit of intrigue also about how it was leaked to the Times. I'm kind of impressed with it. It kind of sets it sets a marker for what we expect on Saturday. But I suppose my surprise is in, given that we've looked at the build-up of all of these games, whether they've been meaningful or not, they've been a run out to see what combinations have worked. And yet we've landed with this 23 that's kind of,
could have landed yesterday.
Yeah.
Played together for
no, that's it. Yeah.
When I look at Zels, the makeup, look at the starting 15. Scott for SA Rugby Magazine wrote a column picking the 23 he would take out. So 9 of his 15 were the 15 that Gatlin started with. And as Gatlin has said, it's not his 15, it's the coach's 15.
Right.
But his 9 was the most. When I looked around at kind of people I read and ex-players and ex-coaches, Clive Woodward, 6 of his 15 were in the side. Sam Warburton, the captain from the last series, 6 of his 15 were in the side. Gatlin himself said that the coaches came in with a 23, but of the starting 15, on balance, they only had 4 in the forwards and 3 in the backs, that they were consistent. So as a player, I'd be thinking, half these coaches didn't actually pick me in their original 15. So democracy rules, compromise. I'm always kind of a bit skeptical when I hear a head coach say, I compromised, we had to compromise. How strong was my conviction then? Yeah. If I felt Scott is the 12, but after a robust debate, he doesn't make the 23 and I'm the head coach.
Yeah.
So I found a lot of interesting comments that came out. We've spoken for the best part of the last 3 weeks about this engineering of a team, and you'd see that team build, and by the time they got to the Stormers match, you probably see 12, 13 of the 15 that you're going to think, and they'll have a hit out as a collective. This team has never played together. Yes, they've had training sessions, they've been in a group for the best part of 5 weeks, but I really do think, and I've said this from the outset, the Boks condition is going to be questionable. They've played one test in 21 months. They've had COVID, but they're a very settled combination. 18 of the 23 started that first match against the All Blacks at the World Cup. 21 of the 23 were at the World Cup. So they know each other. This Lions side, there's combinations that on paper, like the back row, looks bloody impressive, but it just may not gel on the day. So to me, there's a lot of risk in that team. Hell of exciting. I mean, the quality of players in that Lions squad, you could pick 3 different Lions teams. They'd all be competitive. Yeah,
and I don't want to jump off the Lions too quickly, but by the same token, the Boks, we've picked a bunch of guys that are from the World Cup squad, but also there's a lack of continuity there in terms of playing time together. Oxenchair, 2 test caps. Trevor Nyakandi's World Cup lasted 22 minutes. Kwagga at 8 with Sia at 6. Just is that also a lack of continuity there from a playing time perspective as well for the Boks?
Yeah, I think so. It really does balance.
Balances the dysfunction of both sides. Both announcements this week. Sia's obviously been COVID, been quarantined, been kind of sick. Alan Wynne-Jones has made this miraculous recovery, and yet 2 notable key figures in rugby start on Saturday, when conventional wisdom would say, hang on now, let's be a little bit smart about their own health and wean them into this test series, because there's plenty of football to be played out.
I think what it has shown is the respect that there is for both leaders. That the moment Alan Wynne says I'm available, he's in, he starts, he takes over the tour captaincy. Sia arrived in Cape Town on Monday. Yeah. They spoke to him. He had 1 session, and he's starting as
good as gold.
Good as gold. He's starting as the captain, and it's empty the tank. If we get 20 minutes out of you, 40 minutes out of you, whatever, it's that message they said to those players who started in the World Cup final is, we'll pull you the moment we see you've got nothing left in the tank. And it could be 60 minutes, it could be 25 minutes. then we're pulling you. So Jock Nienhaber has said they went with a 5-3 split because they don't know if they're going to get more than 20 minutes out of Pollard. Pollard's not my concern. He's a flyer. You'll get 60 out of him. Pimpy, you'll get 80 out of him if you wanted, because he's not going to be actively involved in the game as much. I think the miracle will be Wyn Jones and Alan Wyn-Jones, and see if they make it to 60. That would be an amazing feat, given the intensity of this test match and the complexity of it. Oh God,
well, I
can't wait.
You have the GPS tracker, so I mean that gives all of the sports scientists that are backing up both sides a key indication of where they are from a performance level, cardiovascularly, and their impact. Their kind of speed endurance and their overall performance, but it doesn't really give us an idea on where they are physically, especially with Alan Wyn-Jones, because clearly, one, he has to be robust in the scrum, and from a leadership perspective, we're not going to question mark that. But certainly at the breakdown and hitting rucks, this is going to be a huge test for someone of his caliber, having made such a recovery. But I think it was the right call to put him as captain, given that we've seen very limited leadership on the field with the other captains, Conor Murray, Stuart Hogg, etc. So I think his presence, when you're going up against those two second rows, Esterbeth and Mostert, that him and Maro Itoje really need to set the blueprint of the physicality, and we are not, budging an inch.
But you talk about how tours have evolved, gents, and in the old days it would be we have to arrive there for 2 weeks, we have to acclimatise, we have to play 2 warm-up games. Lewis hasn't played since basically any rugby base. He's played a couple of games for Sale. He's on the bench. He's starting. He could be on within 5 minutes, given the intensity and the physicality of this game. One of the locks goes down, boom, he's in there, and you're expecting him to play the biggest test match that he will play since the World Cup final, and probably the biggest he will play this year, and potentially till the next World Cup in terms of physicality. There's no other pack that's going to bring it like the Lions will bring it in the series. So there's so many just big cards being played straight up. The two captains, a lock on the bench that hasn't played. It's and then with a weird kind of risk is if you look at the Springbok substitutes, they didn't go with the experience of a Morné Steyn and a Frans Steyn. And I know there's talks about Frans Steyn in terms of his conditioning, but Morné Steyn has been these. To me, if I want someone on the last 20, I'm telling you now, it's Morné Steyn, not Elton Jantjies, on their pedigree and what they've done. And then you look at the Lions as well, and Josh Adams has been he's electric. Top try scorer at the World Cup. Every time, he sniffs tries out. He's a brilliant finisher, he's a big boy, and he, to me, would trouble the South African defence far more than a big, physical, imposing player who was born in this country. And where that first Gary Owen is going, it's going straight to him. And it's like, that's why you left Kimberley when they nail him. So I was very surprised with that selection, and you, Scott, with Josh not being in.
Yeah, well, I mean, Gatland mentioned that, he'd had an emotional week with the birth of his first child. He got banged up last weekend and has a kind of solar plexus injury. But at the end of the day, there will be no better supplement for someone who's just celebrated the birth of their child than being proud of their dad. I mean, he's done nothing wrong not to be in that side. And I think also better in a defensive perspective, because this is test match conditions now. It's not all about production. It's the little nuances that we've seen from him, because he's definitely a player that's grown in that jersey. So he must be bitterly disappointed in that perspective. But, Duan van der Merwe has, again, put a foot wrong, really. And I guess what you have to see is that this is the influence of Gregor Townsend on the selection, and also if Duan, as he's a starter, we have to use him. The Lions have to use him. He has to find the ball. And yes, it looks like on balance when you look at the back line that this is a side that wants to play attack, wants to play with width, wants to play with a certain shape. But I think Van der Merwe's benefit is he needs to come off 9, he needs to come off 10, he needs to do some of the grunt work and use that physicality that we've seen from him, because he's been incredibly potent with the ball.
Yeah, so Scott, you spoke about the need for defense in these big test matches, and now this potential lineup that's aimed at more attack. Do you see that as the reason for a player like Ali Price being selected at scrum half, while Conor Murray, who was the team captain a couple of minutes ago, is relegated to the bench?
Well, I see this as one of the positives of the selection, is that, you know, when you get into this kind of tour environment, it's all about taking your opportunities, and he is someone who's played with a lot of perpetual motion, a lot of tempo, a lot of energy, and he's up against one of the best in the world in FAF. And that's one of his great characteristics is gnarliness. So I think that's a selection based on pure merit at the moment, and the fact that he is the conduit between the forwards and the backs, and I just love the way the energy that he plays with, and he'll be a key aspect. I also see that from a nuanced perspective, his being a left pegger as well, that his kicking game has been far more accurate than Conor Murray and Gareth Davis. So he is there on form. He's in a hot streak, and when players are on hot streaks, you got to give him all the rope you can.
Yeah. If you look at the side though, and when we keep on going back to the World Cup, it's 32-12 against England. But for me, the final was that semi-final against Wales. 16-0 on 77 minutes. Either team could win it. Pollard kicked a magnificent penalty. The intensity that we saw in that semi-final was never replicated in the final, because New Zealand had played their final. England had played their final against New Zealand. So I really did expect a greater Welsh contingent in this side. There's enormous respect for Wales within the Boks setup. We saw Rassie in the documentary talking about the hardness, what tough bastards these Welsh are. They're like the Kiwis, they don't go away. He was not as complimentary of the English and the Irish and the Scots. But Wales, a team who have had the wood on South Africa in the last 5-6 years, beaten them 3 out of 5 times. Gatland kind of seems to know how to play a South African way with the Welsh team. 3 Welsh players, including a captain whose fitness will be questioned in that first 40 minutes. Welsh players who took this World Cup winning Springboks side to the brink and were a penalty away from winning it themselves. And then England, the least performing side in the Six Nations, 6 players. So it looks like a Barbarians 15 if you think about it. 3, 3, 3 and 6, to start the game. Your thoughts there, Scott, in terms of being Welsh as well, but that there were so few Welsh players picked for this first test?
I think those who have followed Gatland and have understood over his tenure as the head coach for Wales will understand that he does pick players on form, and he is loyal when you play for him and you play for him well. But what we've seen is very indifferent performances from someone like Chalupe Faletau, who's obviously not in the 23, and we'll be licking his wounds. But certainly there's so much opportunity over the next couple of weeks that that a lot of the players that have been that are feeling disappointed at the moment are still going to get plenty of game time. So it does surprise me, and I think the whole Liam Williams bench selection is another one you kind of scratch your head, because I would have certainly gone for him as a starter, given his safety at the back, and also let's not forget what he did 4 years ago on that New Zealand Lions tour. He was the kind of genesis of that, with that wonderful try that Sean O'Brien scored. So there's plenty of football in this squad, but it just it kind of it raises an eyebrow, and it creates debate, which is great, because ultimately all that's forgotten at kick-off time, when the ball, as you say, Mark, gets pumped up in the air for Alan Wynne-Jones to take, and we see the intensity and the intention of the venom that will be the contact area.
Scott, so when Wales and South Africa played in the semi-final, there were more than 70 kicks in that match. We've spoken about Ali Price and his left boot, but also the attacking ability of this backline. Do you think the selection of Stu Hogg at the back is an indication that maybe Warren is going to lean towards away from Warren ball and almost more of a Scotland attack?
Oh, for sure, and I think it's an interesting facet that you say, because you've got Hogg, who will do an old school spiral that can relieve pressure and create a 60-meter advantage.
Right.
You've got Elliot Daly at outside centre with a great left peg that again can put those kind of worm balls through and turn aside. So there's definitely a kick-in strategy element, which I think if you look back at the 3 or 4 games prior to the test match, the kick-in strategy for me has been a little bit too vague. It's been about pinging the wide balls from number 10, where I think the strength of this selection is you have that outside wipers ball from Elliot Daly. You have someone like Hogg who can really, can break first defenders. As a great right foot, and also Ali Price, his precision in that positioning. So his game craft and his play has been faultless, and by far better than any of the other number 9s who've had plenty of opportunity, apart from, as you say, Conor Murray, who disappointed because of the level of what we expect from him.
I just want to come back to the physicality of the contest and the warm-up games where you could understand the Lions. We thought we could understand the Lions selections that they're building towards this ideal starting 15 and match day 23 that is geared to beat the Springboks. What Conor Murray said after that SAA game was that the intensity really just shocked them, and it took them 40 minutes to actually realize they were in a game. And by the 60th minute, they felt, okay, we're in this game, we're matching them for intensity and that. 4 of those players remain. Now, everyone else has had these runarounds against no one. And we know that intensity of the Boks is going to go up a level because they're now playing in the Boks jersey. They're not playing as SAA. And they've got some of their big players back again with a Sia Khaleesi and a Pollard at 10. That's what surprises me again, is that risk of, this isn't the Stormers. And we saw in that first 28 minutes when it was 0-0 against the Stormers, a better team against the Lions, they would have put points on the board, and then all of a sudden they're chasing the game. They're not 0-0, 7, 14 points, and now we can relax. They said they had this massive matchup at training. It was test match type intensity, but you can't replicate a test match at training.
No.
No.
Listen.
Educate me, please, Scott. No, you've been there.
No, but the thing is, when you get into, it's called deliberate practice. So you go in through all of these kind of skills that you are trying that manufacture certain elements of game time, whether you haven't got the ball or when you have got the ball and you want to create quick ball from slow ball. So all of these practices are deliberate, because there's a kind of, you perfect the skill to get the best out of the preparation. But nothing, when I go back to my rugby league days, and yes, there was intensity from a preparation perspective, but once you tapered off in the week, your expectation, or the coach's expectation, was that the biggest training session of the week would always be the test match, the game on the Sunday. And we know that that's going to be dialed up on Saturday. But it's just, as you say, there's been, it doesn't seem that there's a fluidity to the selection, because yes, it's very strong in certain aspects, but I just, they have to have this mindset that they know exactly who they're up against, but if they can't get the ball off the box, then they're going to be in a very similar position they were last Saturday against the Stormers. Is that, what do we do? Do we play this kind of wide, expansive game to try and break them on the fringes? Whereas in a test match, you have to start tight and then, expand as you see and as you create pressure and probe various aspects of the defence and then capitalising on. Because if you start a wider game, it's very difficult to narrow it up and play in that middle 30 where you have to play tight football, to control the clock and to see where those kind of elements of your opposition are waning.
Are you expecting cards in this game?
Well, I'll go back to the selection of 6, 7 and 8 for the Lions just for a second, because I think it's a great, listen, Courtney Laws for me is one of the most physical players in the Northern Hemisphere. Got a good body work behind him, nobody can question his ability. Great line out man. He's got great feet, incredibly industrious. but he's prone to that kind of physical aspect where he will call players to him. And I just wonder whether the fact that he hasn't had much game time over the last couple of weeks, whether he may be, at the boiling point at the moment, where I would have seen him as a better reliever coming off the bench when there's some fatiguing legs around the park. So that for me is a concern on your basis, that there's such anticipation for this test match, is that we've seen very well behaved games from a discipline perspective, but discipline, let's make that a point now, is going to be the deciding factor on Saturday, because if there's turnover ball and there's penalties at the breakdown, we could quickly see a side go 15 points up.
Yeah, and that kind of talks to what we were talking about earlier, is this Boks team doesn't have a history of being able to chase games. And so we've got this new look starting lineup, and if Scott's saying about discipline, if the Boks find themselves on the wrong side of the whistle, yes, we've got this power pack bench that's going to come on in the second half, but are the Springboks capable of chasing a game and staying tight and low risk?
Well, the Springboks game plan it's been there for the world to see for a century. It's go 6, 9, 12, 3 up, and the Boks always look brilliant. We create scoreboard pressure and field position. That's how we play. So, but I think the conditioning. So you look at the way they picked that 23. The conditioning obviously is an issue for them, that they feel that pack can't make 80. So when do they get the best out of that front row, their first choice front row? It's potentially in the last 40, and maybe they're backing themselves to chase a game in the sense that they did against England 2018, when they found themselves 24-3 down after 20 minutes. They came back miraculously, were ahead at half-time, went down again, and then scored some wonderful tries to win it. And they were 12-0 down within 10 minutes. Johnny May again punishing them, and came back and basically got into that game and then won quite convincingly and took the series. So there's so many questions that will only be answered on Saturday. The beautiful thing of this is we've got three tests. So this isn't a one-off World Cup final.
But the first answer may be answered to us by half-time. Is that if the Lions are up at half-time, then, not that there's a question of doubt about how the Boks will come out in the second half, is that they like to go into the locker shed up, created pressure, converted the scoreboard, could see that these cracks are appearing in the opposition defence, and where there are some weaknesses, and where we can dial up the Gibbs, as you say, and give it to the Lions. But I think this Lions selection is all about converting that pressure onto South Africa, and they'll be happy defending. I think the Lions, they will be happy defending. They'd much rather have the ball going forward, I'm sure, in that first half. But I think it's a side where there's so much potency in that front eight that they're going to want to put, they want to tattoo their opposition, and really put the question of doubt as to, can you go the full 80? Because we can. If
you look at that line setup and the 15 that are going to start, and we know it's a 23-3-man game, rugby these days, and the test series could be decided by someone who plays 20 minutes every test and comes off the bench. But if you look at who he's entrusted with that starting 15 role, who would you say is under the biggest pressure to ensure they're there for the second test?
Listen, I don't get fixated on that kind of starting 15, because I think it literally is, as you say, 23 men, and where quite likely one of the superstars of this test series will be one of those guys who come off the bench and just have that type of performance and that type of influence. I think not that there's any doubt about Tom Curry's ability as a rugby player and as a starter, but I think the pressure's on him, because he has the out-and-out breakaway, the speedster, the guy that can cause so much disruption at the breakdown. He has to be delivering 3 turnovers a half, at least. And the great thing is you've got Watson, who was very similar, but I think has a little bit more rugby craft, a bit more, it's not rugby craft, but a little more football in him, that we'd be a little bit more complementary in that first 40 exchange, where Tom Curry would be my reliever, if you know what I mean. So I think the onus will be on who dominates the breakdown, who gets the turnovers, because once you get turnovers, you create pressure by pegging the corners, and then it's easily, from a defensive perspective, to try and keep them in their own 20. Both sides are very capable about it. We've seen a lot of rugby played by the Lions, 35 plus tries or something in the games. Listen, at the end of the day, test matches are one about who converts the pressure, who controls the game clock, and who takes their opportunities.
You know, Dan Biggar was in one of his interviews this week. So Peter de Villiers, the former Springbok coach, came out and said no one will want to play like the Boks, no one will follow them. Yes, we won the World Cup, boring as hell, we're never going to be a world leader. Andre Pollard said it's the most beautiful rugby, it's the most beautiful thing he sees outside of his wife, is the way the Boks play, when their pack goes forward and he's standing at 10 and he's just dictating. And Dan Biggar said any team would want to play like them if you've got a World Cup gold medal to show for it. And he also said that there's this belief that South Africa is boorish and boring, but they're not. He says they score some fantastic tries, they play some great football, but they played when they feel content and comfortable, and they don't play helter-skelter in the first 15 minutes. They never have. We've had coaches who come in and tried that, and we've been bollocked. You know, we've looked like imposters of that Springbok DNA. So, you know, I know Dan Biggar's hugely rated in the Northern Hemisphere, and he's like been this late bloomer who's finally arrived, and now he's getting his chance. But that he's got an appreciation of who he's actually playing against, as opposed to a young kid who thinks all these guys can do is this one-trick pony, and they take the ball, they take it out 2 channels, and boom, try time. You know, so.
Dan Biggar has a great appreciation for the history of rugby, I think, you know, because you see that through his career, every year he's kind of grown as a player, like at least by 10%. And that's what's got him to where he is now, where, you know, he is a very well-respected, number 10. And I mean, he's had a very dominant season with Northampton. You know, his bravery, you know that he is not going to leave anything out there on the field. But he will be appreciative of a generation before, maybe 2 generations before, where all of the successful sides were kind of based on a 10-man philosophy, where it was go forward, peg the corners, line out, drive, create pressure, convert while we're down there, retreat, start again. So, and that's where you see his MO. I mean, he's a very, very formulaic, very solid number 10, and he's the guy that you want to be there steering the ship. Pollard, different animal altogether from an athletic perspective and his ability. So again, it's a beautiful kind of compliment when you look at the 2 aspects of the opposing number 10s, but their primary objective and their roles and responsibility is keep this side going forward.
Scott, you spoke about the breakdown, and key to dominating the breakdown is getting access to the gain line, and that brings us to what I think you will agree is the most important position on the field, the number 12s. Robbie Henshaw against Damien Dialindi.
Well, listen, over the last couple of years, they've been world class, and they've been standouts. Dialindi, I'm a big fan of. And I don't think there's a question that, for me, he is kind of the most polished number 12, because if you understand the role of the inside centre per se, it is more than just going north and south, up and down. You know, yes, you've got to make your tackles. Yes, you've got to get over the gain line and create quick ball for your scrum half. But there's so many delicious kind of nuances to his game, with his hands, with his shoulder and feet position in defence, the way that he runs offline. I think he's a real threat. And counter to that, up until the start of this tour, Henshaw was by far the out and out kind of leading horse in that position. So he's probably got some ground to make up, Henshaw, because he's a very productive, industrious player. We know he's phenomenal in defence, but you kind of need to see him really take a spearhead for the Lions' attack, because I'm not too sure whether that for me was the right balance at 12 and 13, him and Elliot Daly as the first starting test midfield. But the onus will be on him to be crossing gain lines.
I was just going to ask you on that, because 13 is normally a lot. Depends on who's at 12 and vice versa.
Yeah.
It's such a specialized combination, and 13 especially with most teams, how they defend, 13 becomes the key. Daly, we've seen, can play on the wing, he can play at 13, he can play at 15, jack of all trades, got a great boot, he can kick a 55-metre penalty. But coming into a test match that's going to be tight in the first hour, where one defensive slip because you're not used to playing a position, how big a risk is that?
Well, listen, he's had more game minutes than anybody, so he's probably got a feel for everyone around him. So because he's been in so many different combinations since the start of the tour. But Test match football is totally different, and let's not forget there's a lot of pace on the outside, on the periphery, from the Boks perspective. So again, from a defensive orientation, you have to have complete trust on your inside man, which will be Henshaw. His shoulders and feet have to reflect that he's got yards to make sure that he can run down his outside centre, his opposite man, get to the 15, even get to the winger. So that'll be interesting. I'll be able to see and read that body language from the outset to see whether this is going to cause them some problems, or whether that's been articulated to him from a coaching perspective, because nobody wants to get skinned on the outside, and you have to have complete trust on your inside man not to leave him too exposed. And that's where, when you look at the Boks 12 and 13, again, it's a beautiful blend, it's a beautiful mix. And these kind of Lion series in South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, they always throw up these beautiful combinations from a Lions. You go back to 2009 O'Driscoll and Roberts. No one quite would have seen it from the outset, but geez, it was beautiful to watch. So I'm not too sure whether this combination will be there in the third test, and a big onus and a big responsibility on Daly's production. And his ability to kind of unlock the outside channels is a key question mark. But they got to go forward. And how do they go forward? There's plenty of ammunition in that starting 15 for them to create problems, to probe and find cracks in the Boks defence. And if you look at the bench, and again, not getting fixated on this kind of who starts at 15, there's a lot of energy that's coming off that bench, which I think will be beautifully complementary. Certainly in that 45, 55 minute channel timeline, where I think we'll see 3 or 4 players come on at once.
And they've gone with the 6-2 split, as South Africa's gone 5-3 because of a lack of options. I mean, Ninabe has said he'll go with a 6-2 every day if he's got the players available. So encouragingly, he's gone with the logic that I don't have these players, so I'll go more traditional 5-3. But I just want to, before we go to the forward, just go back to Owen Farrell's role. You've got Bigger, who has struggled with some injuries on tour, and you've got Robbie Henshaw, who has battled with injury. Could that have been why Farrell's there, not a Marcus Smith? Because there's a good chance he may be in the game, either at 10 or 12 within 15 or 20 minutes.
Yeah, for sure, because whilst Gatlin has had more to say off the field than he ever has, because we're reading more about him in the press than any other time in his history as head coach, is that we've come to, if you read the tea leaves, I think there's a few players that are banged up. So he's covered his bases there for sure, because at least Farrell can come on at 10. He's very comfortable at 12. But we just have to wait and see. We really do have to wait and see. I get the logic behind Conor Murray and Owen Farrell, but I think if you had complete trust and fitness in Bigger's overall health, then Marcus Smith would have been a beautiful selection. Given that the fact is that he arrived here last Monday, had one training session, looked every inch a Lion last Saturday, and is chomping at the bit.
If you look at, we spoke just before the show started, so much being made of the set piece, but people tend to focus to the scrum, and I think mainly because of what happened in that World Cup final. But for me, it's more the line out and the collisions that's going to define this test, as opposed to a scrum. You can still manipulate a scrum, get around it for 40 minutes before that powerhouse front row comes on. Would you say it's more gain line. Everything in this
Mark,
match is going to be gain line.
So there's no doubt that the key aspect for this test match is going to be one on the advantage line. The battle for the ball, the battle at the collision, the impact of the hits, actually the height and the technical ability to hit low and drive up, and above all to keep it clean, because I don't think either side won't want to lose a player for 10 minutes, let alone a red card. So that's where the onus is, and I think that's where the test selection, or that 15, the pack at least from a Lions perspective, that's the biggest challenge, is to absorb that pressure that is going to come in first minute, it's going to be sustained in the 5th minute, and it's going to be sustained at the 38th minute just before the half. Is that the Boks are going to come hard, they're going to come long, and they're going to come all day long, and it's how you disrupt that pattern, how you get offensive tackles in first, how you can challenge to slow down the ball, then push pressure on Faf to have a very good kicking game, which we know he has, and then it's the back three's ability from the Lions' perspective is use of ball. Is it right to counter-attack right now, look up, read the picture in front of you, or is it to convert and put pressure back on the opposing back three to see what they can do? So it is going to be an arm wrestle in that perspective, but let's make no bones about it. It is going to be explosive. The Richter scale will be apparent on Saturday at Cape Town.
How important is this? And this would be a controversial thing, for a referee to apply discretion and not necessarily the letter of the law in that opening 30 minutes, because to lose someone either to a yellow or red in the first 10 minutes, there's so little between these two teams that you're not going to get an Australia-France thing where you can win this test with 14 players. In terms of a spectacle and that, do you see, I know you've studied the referees, Zels, do you see him applying a little bit of rugby common sense in terms of the collision, or do you see it straight being, mate, what I'm seeing is, and boom, so bloke goes, because it would be a travesty for me if we lose someone early on.
Yeah, well, because we all have to be mindful of the head and the neck area, which is clear. I mean, these two sides are physical, and it's one of the attractions of watching Test match football, isn't it? When you tune in, it's like, gosh, and given the way that Esterbeth and Mostert put it around in that SAA game, only makes this game Saturday even more delectable to be tuning into. So, expect that. I mean, but I expect it to be a fair, clean fight in that sense, because there's so much at stake. And also you want to have, there's game 2 and there's game 3. And the pressure is on about trying to get that elusive first win, because for the Lions it's ever more so important than it is for the Boks, I think.
Yeah, Scott, we spoke about how we're expecting this to be a physical battle for the gain line, and just from your perspective, what do you read into them picking a guy like Oxenchair, Lucid, who relatively in the scale of props is on the lower end of the size scale, and then deploying a guy like Kwagga Smith at number 8, replacing a beast like Dwayne Vermeulen?
Well, I absolutely know nothing about the front row, but I know that, listen, he's a good ball carrier, and equally, I'm a little bit disappointed that Mako Vunapola's not starting. Now, I know that there may be a question mark on his overall technical ability from a scrum perspective, but let's make no bones about it. I mean, he's beautiful to watch in the loose. He gets around the park. He offers you a dimension, and I think that's what the Lions will need to find is, one, dimensions. Is there disguise in their game, or is it going to be just north and south all day and a battle of attrition to see who gives an inch and where you can find some weakness on an edge?
As the series unfolds, and the beauty we keep on saying is it's 3 test matches.
Yeah.
Our squad of 23 is pretty much there. There may be 2 changes, a bench change, a starting lineup change based on fitness. Does that benefit us? Because the Lions could put 3 different teams out and they could all be equally effective every weekend, because you're drawing off the best from 4 nations. Is that to their disadvantage potentially as the series unfolds? They've got so many good players that there's this you potentially drop a test by 2 or 3 points, and then you say, do we give those guys a second chance, or do I go with that next selection of players? Is there too much talent in this Lions squad that maybe if they'd had a huge it's like this is the 1, 2, and 3. At the moment, with a lot of those positions, you don't actually know who is 1, 2, and 3 because their own coaches don't know that.
No, that's it. Well, I mean, the ambiguity from the coaching selection perspective about only being convinced of 50% of their starting lineup is a little bit strange. But the fact is that on these tours, it creates opportunity where you never see it, and those who have put their hand up have been selected, and kudos to them. We've had some disappointing show outs from a few notable players that we would have expected more. But this is the kind of kick up the bum that everybody needs, because if you think you're complacent and this competitive anxiety about just being a good teammate, it doesn't exist in sport nowadays. They are ferociously competitive, and yes, they're going to celebrate the fact that 23 have been selected on Saturday, but they know that there's so much football to be played. Is that you've got to be pushing, continue to be the best you can be in support, as well as on the training field and from an encouragement perspective, because you're going to have an opportunity, and that's why it's such a big proposition for that 23 that's selected on Saturday, because if they do it right and they get that victory, then by default they kind of go into the second test with a big smile on their face, and as long as they're not banged up, it's pretty much going to be the same 23.
If you look at the way the tour is structured, it was very different to previous tours where you still had between test 2 and 3 you had midweek games. Here there's none. So the midweek games are now gone. It's just the 3 successive World Cup finals, as I call it. This week I've chatted to a few South African coaches, provincial and coaches who have coached overseas and at international level. And the overriding belief is whoever wins on Saturday wins the series 3-0. Do you believe either team is good enough to come back and overturn that if they lose on Saturday?
I think it's an interesting comment. It really is, given the context of what we're going through, because we haven't got midweek games for further players to put their hand up for selection to show that their professionalism is going to be rewarded over a show of patience, because there is no outside world for the Lions, and I'm speaking from a Lions perspective here, Mark, is that there's nothing for them to do during that week. There's no game time to prepare for. It's like you're either holding pads. There's no social events that can take the ease off the burden just for a moment where you can enjoy the mother city and all of its splendor. That's been taken away from them. So you really have to understand the mindset of these players now from a COVID bubble perspective, is the frustration of not being able to express yourself personally outside of the training field has been taken away. So it is all rugby, and it's dominated by that. So the quicker you get over your disappointment about not being picked and look forward and celebrate with the team in how they play and express themselves, and you're not in that position where you hope that somebody gets an injury so you go in by default. You're going to want to share in the splendor of what this test series is all about. But to go back to that question of who wins Saturday, probably could go 3-0. I mean, it's very possible.
So who wins Saturday?
And that's why I'm going to flip you. You've said from the outset. I think the Lions will win, and I got a feeling that they might do it pretty convincingly. I just have this kind of notion that the discipline is going to be key, and I think there's probably 12, 15 points there to be easily taken off the table by someone bigger. And I also still think that there's 2 or 3 tries in this Lions team. So you kind of just do the math on that. We're edging up to 30 points, and I think from a comfortable perspective, I got no doubt that the Boks are going to be at the game. They'll be at the races on Saturday. But I just have this feeling, and I always get it this time of year when the Lions, is that the first test means so much for the jersey, for those who worn it before, for future generations getting inspired, that the elevation of performance Saturday, we will see Gatland under his mask smiling.
What have you got there, Mark?
It's interesting, Jess. I've got the Boks to win, but barely. So I've got like a 25-22 win.
You scared? You scared?
When I saw that Boks squad, I got a bit scared, but then Rassie told me we'll be fine. I said I felt better already. Yeah. But I think it's going to be. Yeah. I think the best that we're going to see from the Lions will be in the first 40 minutes of in the series. It's going to be the first 40 minutes. I think the Boks will finish the stronger, and I think the Boks will get stronger with the series because they will have played more. The players will be training. They won't be in COVID, and we're saying this in the hope that neither team has a COVID outbreak again. Yeah. And I still back the Boks to win the series 3-0 because I think they'll be playing 3 different Lions teams. Because once this one doesn't work, they'll pick the next one. But this will be the best of the 3 tests. And the fact that they're playing all 3 in Cape Town as well is a huge leveler. When you go back to the original schedule, 2 at the Highveld, potentially with crowds, also influence where I was very confident South Africa would win this series 3-0. They'll still win it as far as I'm concerned 3-0, but there won't be a hell of a lot in the test matches. I'm not quite as confident with the points differential as Scott is for the Lions. So you're saying a 30-15?
No, I'm saying I am saying something along those lines. Not that I'm picking it out of the air. I just feel that there's so much anticipation for this test match, and the Lions know that discipline will be right at the apex of how this test series will be decided.
So just using your belief in the Lions, but saying 15 because of ill discipline from the Boks, and they've been conceding 12 to 14 penalties a match when they've played in the SAA games and the Georgia and the Lions game. And the capacity of the Lions to score 3 tries, bigger kicks, and it takes you just plus 30.
Yeah, that's right.
But I'm saying, are the Boks, as far as you're concerned, capable of scoring 31?
Of course they are.
You think they're a good enough side to get past 30 as well?
Of course they are. But I'm just putting it in the context that I feel that the discipline will fall foul of more at the Boks feet rather than the Lions feet, and that's why I say there's 12-15 points there for Bigger to take off the table, and 2 tries, converted tries, to be 35 points, but then the Boks are going to have to go some to go beyond that, aren't they? So my score prediction is kind of 29-22 to the Lions.
Right, you got a 7 pointer and I've got a 3-pointer, so we got a 10-point differential in the way we see this game. Yeah. What are you going with, Zels?
Oh, mate, I think it's going to be less than 50 points scored.
A draw.
25 to 1.
Yeah,
25 to 1.
Yeah. I think if the Boks can beat the Lions with that squad that they've announced, with that starting lineup, then they'll whitewash the Lions, and I don't think that's going to happen. So I'm going to tip the Lions to win this in a close game.
Jesus, that's not what you said to me before we
started.
Mate,
you got to ask me 5 minutes ago.
I think there's some merit in what Zeli says there, because again, it's not kind of wishful thinking. Is that this? Yes, there may be 18 that played in the World Cup, but I mean, this is not the strongest South African squad that we've seen, and I think every 4 years you get these this kaleidoscope of talent coming together for the Lions, and there's some special players in this setup. So I think there's should be a little bit more stardust on the Lions perspective than it is on the Boks team.
Well, if they don't beat this Boks team,
exactly.
Yes,
that's my point.
Yeah.
Because they will have had 80 minutes for the next week and then the next week.
Correct.
And you don't replace Beast.
Exactly.
So.
But when you have once in a generational players like the Beast and someone like Dwayne Vermeulen not available to you, it does kind of weaken the fabric. It does. It's impossible to say no.
Just my final question to you, Scott. You played in the 97 series here. You're on the 2001 tour. In the professional era, I know you also played in New Zealand in 93, but in the professional era, where do you put this group of Lions in comparison to the other groups of Lions in terms of strength? Or would that only be defined by how they perform in the series?
I think it'll be defined by half-time on Saturday, for sure. And if I go back to the last tour, 2009, I mean, it was it was a bruising first encounter in Durban. The second one, the decider, was even more physical and ferocious from a physical perspective. So they know exactly what's coming on Saturday. And it is the greatest opportunity for any rugby athlete, greatest privilege to wear that jersey, and you've got to wear it with distinction. You can't just go out half-hearted, and nobody expects them to be half-hearted. But sometimes you get caught in the headlights, and the Boks have this ability to intimidate you, even as you walk out. So whilst those things have been kind of diffused slightly because we haven't got a vociferous local crowd, it is still mouth-watering.
I think the absence of crowds favours us. No 40,000 Lions supporters in the stands. I think that
the Red Army.
There would have been it would have been that sea of red. So, and I think the players, as we've said, have gone past that point now of no crowds. They're so conditioned to actually playing each other and just getting on with it.
Both sets of players have kind of had 18 months of kind of no support in that perspective. So you look for inspiration. Where do you look? You look around. You look at your teammate next to you, and you got to read the body language, and you got to make sure that you're banging your chest and you are fresh to go. And that's why I think that maybe the kind of physiology, the conditioning element has to suit the Lions, because they wanted to play an up-tempo game. They don't want to get dragged down into a bit of into a sparring match, and that's what they will be given. They will be given the belief. They'll look around and see that the array of talent that they have, but they got to deliver, and Test match football is all about delivering on the day and delivering on your promises.
Look, I think the next 3 Saturdays will be the most, and especially the 2. Because if the series is decided, that third one always tends to taper off a bit. But the next 2 Saturdays will be the most intense Test match rugby we will see till the World Cup semi-finals. I don't think it can get better than what we've got. Huge. Huge. I've been waiting a long time for this.
You need to use your blockbuster voice for that.
Huge. And it's like, I have such love for the Lions and respect for them and the 4 home unions and just how good they are as a team. And it would be, for me, beating the Lions at home for the Springboks this year would be a bigger achievement than going to New Zealand, winning 2 tests against the All Blacks. That's how good this Lions squad is when I look at depth and what they've got. And to say to the South African public, I've been bullish that the Boks will win, but it's been more a reflection of what I think of the Boks than any disrespect towards the Lions. But this is a fantastic group of players, and geez, I just can't wait till that first test, because next week we'll be able to talk about not who's holding back. When people said Gavin was holding back, he was holding back 11 players last week. So I just can't wait. This is the highlight of the rugby calendar. It's the best thing that happens in rugby when the Lions come on tour. And geez, I wish they were coming every 4 years to this country, not every 12 years.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you, guys. It's been great. I hope you're looking forward to it as much as us. And we look forward to you tuning in again next week, even if it's just to hear Scott try and say, "Yes" again. Until then, ciao.